Alrighty, so this is Unit 6, Concept 2, Notes on the Evidence of Evolution. So there is evidence of evolution in 5 major fields of science. The first is paleontology, which is the study of prehistoric life. The second is biogeography, which is where living things are located. The third is embryology, which is the study of the embryonic development of organisms. Anatomy, which is the study of the structures of organisms. And there is biochemistry, which is the study of the chemical processes in organisms, or in more layman's terms, DNA evidence. So, evidence in paleontology. The fossil record reveals a history of the types of organisms that have lived on Earth, including those that are extinct, and the relative ages of those fossils. So if you'll recall from the Stations Lab that we just finished, we can tell the age of fossils, or the relative age of fossils, based on what layer of sedimentary rock they are found in. So if they are found in layers that are closer to the surface, that means they are probably younger or relatively young. And if they are found deep within the lower layers of sedimentary rock, then they are probably relatively a lot older. So, a fossil. What is a fossil? Fossils are just remnants of animals. And these can be bones, footprints, feces, just anything left behind that is from an animal that is found within layers of rock. And a specific type of fossil called a transitional fossil, these types of fossils have been found, and these link extinct species to current species. And these help scientists piece together evolutionary history. So let's say deep within layer 4 of a specific section of sedimentary rock, we find a fossil of a dinosaur, a pterodactyl or something like that. And then let's say in layer 2 or 3, we find a fossil that maybe perhaps looks like this. And so this is called an Archaeopteryx. Hopefully I said that correctly. And this is actually the link between dinosaurs and birds. So it is a bird-like organism, but it has the features of a dinosaur. There were no bird-like dinosaurs when the dinosaurs roamed this earth. And so the fact that we see this kind of in between organisms suggests that the prehistoric fossils of dinosaurs. So the dinosaurs, they evolved to form this organism here. So after years and years and millions of years of mutation and natural selection acting upon the dinosaurs, we saw this kind of modernized, almost modernized kind of bird. And so if we were to compare this to modern day birds, we would see very similar features. However, again, there is still this kind of dinosaur-like appearance. So we say that this kind of fossil is a transitional fossil because it's an in-between stage of an extinct species and a modern day species. So, evidence of biogeography. So we can see that island species most closely resemble the nearest mainland species, or not the species on similar islands on the other side of the ocean. So when we see that when organisms are separated into different areas of the world, we can see that this points to divergent evolutionary patterns. So when we put similar organisms on various different places in various different environments, we see that mutation and natural selection acts upon that each little grouping individually, and so then we can see kind of this pattern where all of the organisms are kind of diverging away from one another. They are becoming different from this similar species. And so populations can show variation on different islands, like Darwin saw in the Galapagos. So depending upon the different food types available, depending upon the predators that were found in that environment, natural selection acted upon each population in a different way. So the third type of evidence we're going to look at is embryology. And so embryology is when we're studying the development of organisms. And so the embryos of vertebrates are very similar in appearance. So we saw this at station 3, I believe. And they're very similar in appearance early on in development, but they may grow into different structures in their adult form. And so this suggests common ancestry among vertebrates. So we can see they're very difficult to kind of distinguish from one another. And again, this suggests common ancestry among the vertebrates. So I'm kind of moving through this kind of fast because we've already gone through some of this. So evidence in anatomy, we can see here the outline of a human arm. So homologous structures is a term I want you to know. And homologous structures are when similar characteristics result from common ancestry. So they have the same structure, but they have a different function. And these are also the result of divergent evolution. So we all come from a similar ancestor with this similar structure of bones. We all start out with one bone, then we go into two bones, and then we have a bunch of little bones, and then we have our digits or our phalanges and metacarpals. And so we all, or commonly, there are various organisms that showcase this structure. I believe it is humans, whales, bats, and so on and so forth. And so same structure, again, different function. So the greater the number of shared structures between two species, the more closely the species are related. And so this example here was humans, bats, frogs, cats, whales, and other organisms all share the same forearm structure. And this is another piece of evidence that suggests common ancestry. And so another word that I want you to know regarding evidence in anatomy is something called vestigial organs. And so a vestigial organ is a structure with little or no function to the organism. And so they are remnants of structures that had important functions in ancestors of the species. So for example, ostriches have wings, but they can no longer fly. And so they used to at one point have an important function in an ancestor of that species. However, they have since not been of any use to that organism. So our wisdom teeth are another example of a vestigial structure. And in fact, most of us tend to have those taken out because our jaws can no longer support that number of teeth. And so this is also pointing to evidence of divergent evolution, or otherwise known as closely related organisms they then diverge away from one another. Natural selection acts upon them individually. Acts along their population individually, and then we start to see these differences. So another word that I want you to know regarding evidence in anatomy is something called analogous structures. So we have vestigial organs, homologous structures. Homo means same. Vestigial organs, and then analogous structures. And so analogous structures are kind of like homologous structures, except for its opposite. They have a similar function, but they have a different structure. And so this is when organisms have evolved similar structures due to living in similar environments, however, not due to ancestral relatedness. And this is evidence of convergent evolution. So this is what was happening in Station 6 of the Stations Lab for Evidence of Evolution. So we can see that insects and birds like this owl versus this fly, they have both evolved similar structures. So they have both evolved wings, although these have very different structures. However, they serve the same function. They both serve the organism to be able to fly. And so convergent evolution is when organisms that are not so closely related, maybe they have a more distant common ancestor, but because they are in similar environments, they both need to be able to fly, they have developed similar structures, similar structures. Okay, and then I believe this is the last one, evidence in biochemistry. So in DNA and proteins. So when we compare similarities in DNA and amino acid sequences in different species, we can do this to find common ancestry. And so when two closely related organisms have similar DNA sequences, we say that they are more closely related. And so we can also see this happening when we look at pseudogenes. And so pseudogenes are pieces of DNA, sections of DNA that look like genes, but they no longer function. And so they're essentially the vestigial structures of genetics. And so over here, if we look at these two pieces of DNA, these two sections of pseudogenes, we can see here between let's see, I think that's a hippopotamus and a whale, humpback whale, yep. We can see that they have very similar structures of DNA, except for maybe there's a difference here, a difference here, and a difference here. However, we can see that the rest of the DNA, the rest of that sequence of DNA is incredibly similar. And so we say that this is evidence this is evidence from a line of evidence called biochemistry and DNA, supporting the theory of evolution, that we all organisms on Earth have evolved from a common ancestor. And that is Unit 6, Concept 2, Evidence of Evolution.